Imagine seeing your favorite film.
Good Lord.
In a historic movie theater, surrounded by lots and lots of movie buffs. Well, you don't have to imagine it if you know the secret. I'd love to welcome Craig Hamill, the founder of Secret Movie Club. This is such a great idea, I can't even tell you.
When I went to USC Film School, I would show movies and have the filmmakers come speak. So I was lucky enough, we had Robert Wise, who was the director of West Side Story and Sound of Music. He agreed to come in. And we had Russ Meyer, who did Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, and Michael Mann, who had done Heat at that time.
You could lounge around here on her sofa in her ex-husband's dead tech, post-modernistic boat house.
Cut to, I'm 36, 37. If I could find a theater that shows film and show my favorite movies on film, it's something that I could get into, and there'd be integrity to it. I know I'd be passionate about it, so it'd be real. I wouldn't just be doing it to do it. April 2016, I called all these theaters around town, and it's funny, you know, sometimes it feels like the universe is guiding you to where you need to be. And all these other theaters were like, $5,000, $10,000. And I was like, And then the Vista said, look, we like your idea. If you're willing to do midnights, we can cut you a deal. And I thought, you know, I love the Vista. It's one of the last remaining single screen community theaters. It was built in 1922. It's 370 seats. They still show film. And it was almost like there was no choice. But if we want to do something at prime time, we had to find other venues. So we just opened a 99-seat theater and performing arts space in the downtown arts district where we could show deeper cuts, international movies, documentaries, great cinema that might only bring in 50 or 90 people, but there's a real need for that kind of cinema.
Although you chose midnight as an opportunity financially, there's something really, I mean, those of us who are old enough to remember going to the midnight showing of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and there's something about being in that group of people at that hour and just hanging out together. Are you finding that same sort of zeitgeist
absolutely.
in what's happening?
Absolutely, and so the funny thing is, and that I really think this, if I had done this as a business thing to start, where I was like, I'm gonna make a lot of money from this idea, I don't think it would have worked. But doing it at midnight, showing movies I loved, we never picked movies for money. And so the funny thing is, like you're saying, we showed Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon at midnight, but the funny thing was that we had 300 people watching a 3.5-hour period movie that's a very slow movie.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, Barry Lyndon, Barry Lyndon. And you realize it was kind of punk rock to show such a stately movie at midnight, and somehow film nerds and people who love movies were like, yeah. So what you were saying though, Maria, that's key is it's about community.
Hello, welcome to the Vista Theater.
We have a film series called The Great Silence, and we're showing the amazing 1922 F.W. Murnau movie, Nosferatu. And if behind us is an 8-piece ensemble. This is an original score for this 1922 movie. They're gonna perform it live while we watch the movie.
Imagine it's just taking you back to time where they used to show films this way.
This theater is a dream come true because I mean, that's the great thing about being in the city is you can see like this old obscure German movie from the 20s with a full orchestra on Saturday morning.
I feel like just the movies we see here like are movies that need to be experienced in a theater setting like this. So it's really nice to do that.
The Vista Theater was always an alternative theater because we do not have a balcony. So back in the days there was segregation and they would separate people by class. At the Vista Theater that never happened.
This theater was built in 1922. It is built, if anybody knows the silent movie Intolerance by D.W. Griffith, it's one of the most famous silent movies. It has a very famous scene in ancient Babylon where the sets are huge and there are elephants and thousands of extras. That scene, that set is right where you and I are standing right now. They shot that right here at the corner of Franklin and Sunset Boulevard. That set stood here for like 4 years and sort of deteriorated. Then they bulldozed it and they built the Vista.
When you're kind of a horror fan, you always want to take advantage of these events. So I'm just very excited. I saw it and right away I bought the ticket, so it was meant for me to be here.
I think maybe this is just a theory, like, because we're doing so much on our phone and on our laptop, to sort of shut those down and sit with 300 people in this kind of communal space and have a community experience. I think there's something to it.
Let's go back to the films themselves.
Yes.
You said that originally when you did screenings at USC, they could only be awesomeness. Who is choosing your awesomeness?
We have a lion's head, a Chinese lion's head, and we ask people to write down suggestions and put them in the lion's mouth. And so when I see a title come up over and over again, like Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise, I just saw that title 30 times. And I thought, okay, people want to see.
There's a need.
They need to see Phantom of the Paradise.
I want you to stop terrorizing the paradise and rewrite your cantata.
Phantom of the Paradise.
I program, and I love programming, and I choose a lot of it, but there's a lot of input and a lot of collaboration.
The vast array of films that you have described as we've been chatting, I don't think I've ever met anybody who knows as much or about as many films as you do. You're a literal encyclopedia. Did you just watch movies all day, every day for half of your life?
You know, it's funny, I think about this too, and I'm going to try to tell concise stories. My folks divorced when I was 6, and one of the ways that we really bonded with my dad on weekends was, you know, he was struggling to make it, but renting movies was something that we could all be together, we could all do. So I have this really fond memory, 6, 7, 8, and it's funny, my mom would only let me watch things that were age appropriate. So I couldn't watch a PG-13 movie till I was 13. So with her, I saw all the classics. And my dad loved movies too, but with him, we could watch like Blade Runner. And that was totally inappropriate at 7. I couldn't sleep. But I saw Blade Runner at 7, made a deep impression on me when Rutger Hauer meets his maker.
Time to die.
My whole family was into it. My great-grandfather was a tailor at MGM. Oh, my. I should say, he did the Tin Man's outfit.
No way.
Yeah, I should have told you that. And my grandmother was, I think, 9 years old on the set where the lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow look at the castle when they're singing, "Oh, wee, oh." That was the day she was on set. Oh. And they were shooting that shot. So come from working class Hollywood. But that started it. And from high school on, I developed this habit of, I don't sleep a lot, so I would put on a movie around 11 p.m. and I'd watch at least a movie a night. And so I ended up seeing 7 or 8 movies a week. I think, like in any field, people can get, maybe not even intentionally, but a little elitist or snobby about their taste and then kind of look down. Like my wife, I'm so great. My wife, she always wanted to watch Minions or Despicable Me 2 or, you know, How to Be Single. But then she was like, no, those movies are delightful and funny, and this is what we, and my wife expanded my movie universe because I was like, you're right. And I watch them and I'm like, oh, that is, How to Be Single is a lot of fun.
If Tom texts you, wait 4 hours to respond. And if you use an emoji, I will punch you.
No!
An emoji?
Oh.
And so that was a big light bulb to me that, you know, movies, and I hope they stay this way, are a great democratic art form. And they're for everybody. Right. And so yes, you can have Barry Lyndon. Or yes, you can have Akira Kurosawa's Redbeard or Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion. You can also have Raiders of the Lost Ark. You can also have Mission Impossible 6. They all please people.
Okay, so now there's lots of opportunities for people to see their favorite films, films they've never seen, or just to hang out somewhere at midnight. So how can people find out about all these great films?
So probably the easiest thing is just Google, for now, Secret Movie Club and Eventbrite. And our entire schedule is on Eventbrite with ticket links.
All right, the secret's out.
Thank you, Maria.
Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Saida Pagan.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, every day 10,000 Americans are turning 65 years of age. So the topic of mental aging is very relevant to all of us as more Americans grow older. Today we are joined by two leading researchers in this field. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, we know that both of you work at the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Tell us a little bit about this center. Let's begin with Dr. Ringman.
Sure. So back in the 80s, the National Institutes of Health identified aging as a significant issue and then established a network of centers funded with taxpayer money to study Alzheimer's disease and cognitive aging and aging in general. So the USC was one of the first centers funded at that time, and we've continued to be an Alzheimer's disease research center since then.
What actually happens to the human brain as it ages?
So there's a number of changes that happen with getting older that happen to everybody. So everybody starts to have a little bit of trouble with finding the right words, a little bit more of the situation where you walk into another room and you can't remember why you went in there. So those are changes that are normal with aging that happen to everybody. Then getting older also puts you at an increased risk of developing diseases that are associated with aging, such as dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
And Dr. Ringman, what is actually happening to the brain? We mentioned some symptoms, but what's actually happening to the brain as we age?
With so-called normal aging, there is a slowing down of how the neurons, those cells where the calculation is done, the speed at which they can communicate, but also overall you tend to lose those cells with age. So there is a overall shrinkage of the brain that occurs, especially in more advanced age.
Now, a lot of us in the public are a little confused about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. So both of you, I'd like to throw it out to both of you to explain the difference to our audience.
Dementia is just a general term that refers to a cognitive problem that affects your ability to do your everyday activities, like managing your money or remembering to take your medications. There's a lot of different causes of dementia, but the most common cause is something called Alzheimer's disease.
Doctor, what are some of the other causes of dementia in addition to Alzheimer's?
Sure. So Alzheimer's disease probably accounts for about 2/3 of cases of dementia in the elderly. Other relatively common causes are cognitive impairment, dementia due to cerebrovascular disease, that is, having had strokes. But also the Lewy body disease or Lewy body dementia is another cause. That's it's on a spectrum with Parkinson's disease, but there are many other causes. There, frontotemporal dementia is another neurodegenerative cause of dementia, which is less common. But all things down to head injury, like having been hit in the head too many times, or one time severely.
Now, I think a lot of people are wondering, well, when is it going to start happening? So let's talk about the age. I know it can happen at a very early age. Doctor?
Right. Changes that are typical with normal aging start to happen gradually, starting kind of in midlife and continue as you get older. Your risk for developing Alzheimer's disease goes up significantly after you hit about 80 or 85. So the risk for someone who's between 65 and 75 of developing Alzheimer's disease is about 1 in 250, but the risk of someone who's over 85 of developing Alzheimer's disease in the next year is about 1 in 13. There are rare forms of Alzheimer's disease that Dr. Ringman studies that can present a lot earlier in the 40s or even earlier than that.
Would you like to add to that?
Well, sure. Well, luckily that kind of form of Alzheimer's is very rare. But we've been studying a number of families that are basically our one extended family that have onset around age 40. But just this morning I was seeing a patient that started getting symptoms at age 23. But like I say, it's luckily a very rare form of Alzheimer's disease.
So that leads us to the question, what can we do to perhaps either prevent it or delay it?
We think that everything that's good for the heart is good for the brain as well. So we encourage everybody to exercise. It helps get your blood pumping and helps your brain get the blood that it needs. A generally healthy diet, in particular a Mediterranean style diet, has evidence for preventing or slowing cognitive symptoms. And then taking care of the same risk factors that can cause heart disease. So if you have high blood pressure, making sure you're working with your primary care doctor to have it well controlled. If you have diabetes, same thing, working with your primary care doctor to make sure it's really under good control.
You mentioned earlier about possible medication, cure. How far away are we from all of that?
Cure implies you're completely, someone who's affected by illness, you're reversing it and they're normal. That may be tough to do in Alzheimer's because by the time people show symptoms, they've lost a lot of their brain, and their parts of it. So actually returning someone to normal who already has dramatic symptoms may be a tough goal. But more tractable is slowing the progression or preventing it, putting it off what would be the onset in people by 3 years, and people, if they're older in life, that can may have a big impact. I think we're pretty close to that. Unfortunately though, if you'd asked me this 20 years ago, I would have told you the same thing. So we'll see. I think we're on the right track. I think because of some recent drug study failures, I think we're opening up our mind as to what avenues to pursue, and I think that that's gonna, in the long run, is gonna lead to treatments or preventive measurements which may be combined treatments. There may not be one thing we can do to prevent Alzheimer's, but we may have to engage in a combination of things.
This is a fascinating subject, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers want to find out more. So where can they start with their research, Dr. Joe?
So if they're interested in learning more about Alzheimer's disease, a good place to start is any website published by the National Institutes of Health, or the NIA. They have a lot of resources online. If they're interested in participating in clinical research, they can either go to clinicaltrials.gov to look at options for different trials that they might be eligible for, or they can go to the USC ADRC website, which is adrc.usc.edu, and we have a list of all of our currently enrolling studies, and they can see what they might be interested in.
Do they have to be careful about what they read? I'm sure there are a lot of conflicting sources of information out there.
Yes, be very careful, especially what you see on TV, because people were advertised to sell on TV, because people will sell things to people who are desperate, and at what cost. So we get a lot of questions in clinic about things that people have seen on TV.
And is this type of research that you're doing being conducted in other parts of the country?
Yes, absolutely. So almost all of the Alzheimer's disease research centers that are funded by the NIH follow older adults over time. They all have different focuses though. So at USC, our interest is specifically in the health of the vascular system and how that contributes. So that's a little different than a lot of the other centers, so who may be looking at other specific changes.
Now, going back to your research, are you looking for people who are willing to participate? Tell us about that. Doctor?
By all means, we're always looking for folks to participate in our studies. Without participants, we can't make our scientific observations. We have very specific studies, right? So we might not have a study for everyone, but there are, people who are healthy of a certain age and are concerned about their risk of developing Alzheimer's because they had a family member that had it. So whether it's a highly genetic form or a late onset form, that tends to drive a lot of our studies and the enrollment therein.
Good luck with the wonderful research that you're doing. And thank you for joining us for this edition of LA Currents. I'm Saida Pagan. Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Saida Pagan. For more than a decade, the Ebony Repertory Theater has been showcasing the very best in African American stage performance. Ebony Repertory is the resident company and operator of the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center located along Washington Boulevard. Well, today we are very honored to have two extremely influential individuals in the history of our city, former state senator and city council member Nate Holden, founder of the Performing Arts Center, and Ren T. Brown, an award-winning performer of stage and screen, a director, producer, and co-founder of the Ebony Repertory Theater. Thank you both for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
It is my pleasure.
It was so important, I'm assuming, to keep that theater and performing arts center for the community. Ren, tell us about the history of that part of Los Angeles with regards to African American performance.
That community is rich, rich, rich in history regarding the theatrical arts. It became the Ebony Showcase Theater in 1966 under the leadership of Nick and Edna Stewart. They had founded the Ebony Showcase Theater in 1950 at another location here in Los Angeles, and they purchased that property in 1966. I'm a fourth generation Angelino. My great-grandmother was born here in 1890 at 24th and Maple. Her parents were married here in 1882. I was born 150 yards from the front door of the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center. I walked past there every single day of my life to go to grammar school, to get a hamburger, to get my hair cut, to go to middle school with all of my siblings. I have 4 brothers and a sister and my entire neighborhood. And Mr. Stewart, Mr. Nick Stewart and my grandfather, Troy Brown, they were in Swingin' in a Dream on Broadway together in 1939. So it had been a theatrical corridor for many, many years. And when I was a child of about 6 years old, it was the first marquee I had ever seen. And so when it came to the founding of the Ebony Repertory Theater, I named it in honor of the first marquee I'd ever seen.
Well, let me just say how
Yes.
it was named Nate Holden by the community, not me.
Good idea, though.
Yeah, when it was finished, I wanted to name it Ebony Showcase and talked to the family about that. They said, no, it's our name and we're going to keep it.
Why is it important for the African American community to have its own theater, to see its stories being told on the stage?
Because often the narrative is written by the dominant culture, and the narrative is often poorly written about communities of color. And so when you can see yourself as whole, when you can walk into a theater and you can see a play where your mother or your grandmother or one of your siblings is represented, though that is not that individual on the stage, you know that, you intellectually know that, but there is a kinship immediately. There is an understanding immediately, and it's vitally important because when you're able to see yourself as whole, then you're able to exit that theater chamber and to treat someone with another kind of intentional civility. You feel better about being a human being.
Would you like to add to that?
It generates pride. That's very important. When you know that your story and the community story is being told and it's on stage. It reminded me when I was a kid, if I went to the movie and I didn't see any people of color in the movie, sometimes the butler, the chauffeur, the maid, nothing outstanding. So it said to the community and to the general public, that's what you do. You're the butler and you're the maid and you're the chauffeur and that's it. When I was a kid, we had one day a week we could go to the movies, African Americans. And if you did, you have to sit downstairs. And when I would see those movies, and obviously we were not represented, but at the time the African American performers were making movies, black movies, cowboy movies, okay? And when I said, now we have an opportunity to upgrade that, and now I'm a city council member. And this is my challenge, this is my time to make it happen. And so when you're given the opportunity, I talked to my friends in Washington and were able to get the funding to create the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center, and that's so it is today.
Now tell us why you began your theater company.
I began the Ebony Repertory Theater born of necessity, When you talk about cultural specificity, particularly in the 500 square miles that is Los Angeles, we had never had a professional performing arts center from an African American perspective. We're talking about professional, where artists are paid a living wage. We have the East-West Players, we have the Latino Theater Company, but there was never a professional African American theater company in the city's history. So we are the first and only African American equity theater in the city's history. Actors Equity was founded in 1913, and we were founded in 2007. So we're very proud of that distinction, and we felt it necessary to have our community see itself as whole, to put things on the stage that really represented the diversity and the demographics of the community. And so it was out of necessity. I have lived in the 10th district my entire life, and as I drove past watching the cornerstone placed on the new theater, I drove past and, you know, just kept coming to me that I hope that this is not a white elephant. And I had something residing in me that said, if I have an opportunity, you know, to really put some culture into that building, that's what I want to do. And it ties to our mission of wanting to have diverse, high standard professional performing arts. And so that's how it came about in my spirit. And I grabbed together a kitchen cabinet of 6 people who supported me tremendously. And the advent of the Ebony Repertory Theater happened in June of 2007.
What do you believe the mission was, or what did you believe the mission was at that time?
That the community should have their own theater, can be identified with the African culture. And Ren stated it so perfectly because that's what he's brought to the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center. And the community just so excited when they go there. When I'm out in the community, people come to me and they says, "I was at the theater. We enjoyed the play, we enjoyed the performance." That's what it was for. That's their way of saying thank you. No matter how hard you work, what commitment you make to provide that facility for the community, all I want is saying, I enjoyed the theater, I enjoyed the play. And they're gonna go on for years.
How do you determine what goes on your stage? How do you determine which performances to bring to Los Angeles?
Firstly, I must say, I call Senator Holden, I call him Councilman Emeritus. He's been such a joy in my life and such a supporter of mine. And so anything that we do, I wanted to represent his name well, because he represented his district and his constituency so beautifully throughout his 16 years in city council particularly. So I always want to do high standard work where we walk into a theater chamber that bears his name. As the producing artistic director, it's kind of my taste and my choice that way. Most of the people we put on that stage are in Los Angeles. Every now and again we will bring someone from out of state, but it's primarily pulling from the pool of great artists and great thinkers in the Los Angeles community. But it's really kind of been the journey of my life, being greatly impacted by brilliant minds from a lecture series perspective. I've seen over 1,000 plays in my life. I've participated in so many plays as an actor. I've now directed several plays, and I certainly have produced many more. So it's really about my taste and my aesthetic as the producing artistic director.
Do you have groups of school children coming in from time to time?
Oh, we give away scores of tickets to every run of every show so that the youth can come and participate in the work that we're doing.
And how do you feel about that, having the kids come and participate?
I love it. That's the idea. In fact, I drop by the theater from time to time, and they have dancing groups there, just practicing, rehearsing, and so on for the performances that they're going to put on at some other location, perhaps. But the kids are our future, and many of them are dedicated to the arts. They just don't have a chance to display their talent. And so it's important to me to know that this facility is a location where they have an opportunity to do that. And Mr. Ren Brown is making sure that it's available, the doors are open, they can come there and train.
One last question, where do we find more information?
www.ebonyrep.org, 323-964-9768.